Hello, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural interview on the Practical Insight podcast. I'm your host, Jason Taylor. And today we have a guest I'm very excited to speak with, Jerry Conrad, who's a solution engineer with Salesforce Public Sector Division. So glad to have you on the podcast today, Jerry.
Great to be here, Jason. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Now, before we get started, I'd like to give people a little bit of background on you. I'll have you flesh this out a little bit more in a minute. But Jerry and I have worked together for at least 5 years, and he's always been a remarkable engineer to work with. If you look at Jerry's LinkedIn profile, one of my favorite parts is his current title is Distinguished Strategic Solution Engineer. And although that may sound a little hyperbolic, my experience is that's a very accurate description of his abilities. Jerry's a graduate of Penn State and has worked with distinguished companies like Cognos, Oracle, and for the last 9 years, he's been working as a sales engineer at Salesforce, and most recently in their public sector. So, Jerry, thanks for making the time today, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yep, happy to be here.
Okay. So, just to get started, can you give the listeners a little bit more insight into your background? How did you get to where you are today?
So, the title, I think distinguished, they just ran out of words for, what they call their solution engineers. And I think distinguished just makes me sound old. And I have been doing this a long time. So I have been a solution engineer for going on 25 years. And prior to that, I was just, I had a background in technology, was a consultant, built applications, did a lot of GIS work. And then just through meeting someone at a wedding, went into the solution engineering world where, I worked more on the sales side, but built, prototypes and demos and worked with implementation partners to solution things. And it was the perfect mix of, being technical, but presenting to people and, worked for an analytics company. Then I was at Oracle for 10 years. And best decision I ever made was, exactly 9 years ago, coming over to Salesforce and sort of embracing the cloud technologies. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was interesting about Salesforce that caused you to make a jump?
So around 9 years ago, there was a lot of really strong movement into the cloud. And I had a couple coworkers that had left and gone to, various cloud companies, and a couple that had gone to Salesforce, like technologists that I really trusted. And a lot of them said, every technology company sort of embraced the cloud a little bit differently. Yep. And a lot of them came back and said, okay, this company actually knows what they're doing. The way they've architected the platform, like there's so much under the hood that customers don't even know about. Traditionally, like in the past, as a solution engineer, to build out a solution and use, anyone as a consulting partner, you'd have to stitch together 10 different technologies. And, with the more modern cloud platforms, a lot of that stuff is kind of pre-baked, and it just was easier to build solutions. And it's fun to work for and exhausting to work for a company that is cranking out innovation as fast as Salesforce.
Well, and that's one of the things that I noticed when I was selecting Salesforce. So one of my first jobs was when I worked for a wealth management division. How I got in the Salesforce train was I was told I had to implement a CRM. And I looked at Salesforce, and not only was it like a low-code solution, it was very easy to be able to model things out. And not only that, it was the community of people. Like they had a community where you could ask questions and people were very responsive. They post all their help documentation online for free. A few years ago, they started the Trailhead. So just this open ecosystem was incredibly attractive to me. And this concept of being able to take things from idea to proof of concept or implementation was like amazing. And I feel like obviously the focus of this podcast is about artificial intelligence. And I feel like it kind of extends that paradigm where it's like you take these really sophisticated tools and with not that much effort, you can turn it into really cool solutions that can make a significant impact on people's lives. So obviously, we've heard a lot about OpenAI. We've heard about these large language models, uh, and a lot of people are using those at a personal level. ChatGPT to write stuff, build strategy, and things like that. But AI in business is a little bit different. How do you see AI being used at a business level than you would just as a regular end user?
So, I mean, there's definitely been an evolution with AI that you know, I originally was an analytics solution engineer, in prior jobs. So there's been an evolution from machine learning and predictive models. Like that's been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that stuff didn't get implemented into business solutions, I think, the way people thought it would. Like there are definitely cases where, using machine learning and predictive analytics is very helpful, but it didn't become part of everyone's sort of daily life. But then when generative AI really started to come out with ChatGPT and sort of all of the large language models that were open to the public, I think that's when people started to get really excited about, look at the power and how quickly we can do things with generative AI. And then around that same time, Salesforce went on, they started either acquiring or developing different technologies that would be the underpinnings of a lot of the Gen AI platform that's out there now. So, in the last couple of years, we've started to see the Salesforce philosophy around AI is that it all starts with data. So they released Data Cloud a couple of years ago. And I don't think a lot of us that were using it realized what its potential was until now it's part of a bigger sort of AI strategy. Now I think everyone sort of gets it. And especially with the recent release of Agent Force, an autonomous agent that sits on top of our Einstein trust layer that can do prompts and wire into a semantic search into Data Cloud, for a RAG search, answer, and then use generative AI to turn that answer into a question that the agent can answer. All the pieces and parts are there. And it wasn't really until those pieces came together that a lot of us realized, like you said, we can build and prototype these things incredibly fast instead of having to assemble 12 different technologies. And it allows us to be able to put that into a business process or into a solution very, very quickly and iterate it on. That's the big thing, is it's not cost prohibitive anymore to iterate on something that will actually be part of a business process. Where in the past, if you were DIYing and assembling all these pieces and parts, you really had to have stuff figured out. Otherwise, you were spending, a year of development to get to something that might not meet the business need. Whereas now, there's just components within the platform that you can spin things up and ideate on them as quickly as possible and figure out if it's really exciting, like how quickly you can build stuff on the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just watching Agent Force, I think in Toronto today. They were doing a webinar and showing some of the cool things that you can do with an agent. You can access databases, access RAG repositories, use the large language model just for general, like completion and search of information. So it's a really turned to be very powerful. But with this powerful tool set, how should businesses prioritize where AI can be used and where they should invest their time, effort, and resources?
So that's the question everyone's talking about right now, is like, how do we use, now that these technologies are available, how do we use them? And so I cover specifically public sector. So I work with government agencies, state and local agencies, and their focus on AI is definitely going to be different than commercial organizations,
Right.
Primarily in the public sector realm. We want to do things as quickly as possible, to help a constituent. Or if I'm running a call center, I would love to be able to take, the simple things that are taking up a call taker's time, and use an agent for that to free up those call takers to help with like the real problems, the stuff that an agent can't solve. So a lot of the focus in public sector is around the things that AI is really good at right now, like automating monotonous tasks, like read through all, a year's worth of case notes and give me a summary, or tell me, the next steps or look for anomalies, like things that if someone had to sit down and do manually, they'd have to read for an hour. Generative AI does a really, really good job with that. And we don't want to take the human out of the equation, especially in public sector, when there's either money or benefits or, things related to a constituent. Like we
Right.
don't want the agents to take over, but the amount of work that they can do to speed up the process so we can get more done with less people is very enticing right now. And a lot of people are, especially with some of the newer releases, looking at ways to dip their toe in the water, knowing that to keep up, they're going to have to start to add these things in. And the big thing that I'm seeing is the next group of, new government workers that are coming in are used to having AI in their daily lives. Like you just mentioned, like using ChatGPT every day. I didn't used to do that. I'm trying to say this politely. You and I both have gray hair. Like we're not spoon picking.
We're
So
distinguished.
I didn't grow up with a computer. I didn't grow up with a smartphone. So like a
Yeah.
lot of the new technologies, I'm learning and picking up and adopting. But like the kids today, are used to using ChatGPT in their daily lives every day. I just did a workshop at a university, and it was a bunch of co-op students. And I asked, how many people, know what a prompt is? Every hand goes up. I said, how many people have used ChatGPT? Every hand goes up. And then I said, how many people use ChatGPT every day? Every hand went up. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. You're a different audience than what I'm used to talking to with state employees. So like, but they know that as newer employees come in, they're going to have to keep up with sort of demand of using modern tools to solve the problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I'm starting to realize. Like I'm having conversations with my kids about, like, even in the schoolwork, where does it make sense to use ChatGPT? And you need to be careful about it. I had the situation the other day where my son he had to create a video, and he used ChatGPT to help him to write the script. And he made some modifications to it to, try and make it sound less AI. And we were recording, and my daughter overheard it. She's like, that was written with ChatGPT. Like, it definitely spurred a conversation that there's obviously different levels of comfort that people are having with these large language models and what they're good for and what they should be used for.
So you're hitting on where I think both businesses, government, and then like say education, there has to be a governance model around all of
Right.
those. Like when is it appropriate to use? When is it not appropriate to use? And I think a lot of the states agencies I'm working with are looking into refining that. A lot of states are very scared of, because their knowledge of generative AI is ChatGPT, which is sort of a free for all and open, and you're not always sure what you're going to get back. So being able to go in with a message of like, hey, we have a more structured, secure way to do generative AI definitely helps, but I think there needs to be that governance model. The same thing that you'd have for like someone designing an overall application. I think organizations, both government, commercial, they're going to need to have internal people that, know how to apply governance models to different applications so that people aren't overreaching or using AI where it shouldn't be used, but they're also not missing out on opportunities where it could,
Right.
Directly move the needle.
Right. So when you talk about like governance models and being able to effectively implement those, I'd like for you to kind of expand on that a little bit. Just this morning, I was having an internal conversation, and we were talking about going and presenting to a particular state. So I used AI to do some research, and what I saw was it was all about guardrails and protections. There wasn't a lot of visioneering that I saw take place in that state's website. So you can tell that there's a lot of concern about the governance, the misuse, the accidental exposure of information, which are all definitely legitimate concerns. When you talk about implementing a governance structure or governance model, tell me, like, do you have some examples or suggestions for how to effectively do that, even though the language models most of them do have some of those constraints put in place. But I'd really like to hear what you're seeing in the public sector space.
So, I mean, there's just definitely been discussions about coming up with, governance applications where you have a rubric of like where you're tracking all the different use cases, maybe for using a prompt within, to update a field based on a trigger in some application, where you're tracking where the data is coming from that's, going into the prompt, what the prompt is actually doing, what the output of the prompt is, what is the action taken from that prompt, and actually tracking that in almost like a governance application, and then having, either a board or, some oversight that reviews that to make sure that all the steps along the way, okay, this still falls within the state's or the company's guidance for how we would use generative AI. I think just having a tracking model for that, which could be a really simple application, just tracking inputs, what we're doing with the data, what the output is, what we're doing with the output. I think that's a start. And then having a way to track with any business process, if you have a paper trail and auditing and checks and balances along the way, that is what's going to go a long way towards people having buy-in and, allowing, more, modern solutions like this to get into their business applications.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. Like if you've got that audit log and then you do the appropriate analysis and you've got accountability for what's going in, what's coming out, I think that's a great place to start.
And you're keeping track of it in every application, because the way that you can implement generative AI now, and not just Salesforce, any platform, there's productized instances of generative AI where like you just turn on something within Salesforce and it uses generative AI to like classify a case. Like that's not, you're not building a prompt, you're not implementing anything, it's baked into the product. But as a governance model, I'd still want to know that there's something being generated with an AI model for this field, all the way to like building your own custom, prompts that are wired into, an agent or a process. So I think in a very short amount of time, there's going to be AI threaded into a lot of parts of an application, and just having a application that keeps track of that, so that if there is, say, a policy change at the state, you could do a report to tell you, well, where in every one of our business applications are we doing this type of AI, so that I know, again, where to go and sort of address them.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I think another thing that I also hear about is, like the use of PII or, PHI. So being able to include, like not allowing inclusion of that in the model, or if I send it, is that going to be incorporated in the training data? Am I accidentally going to expose some of that information? Like, what are you hearing about clients and how they're preventing some of those things from either going to the model or making sure that it doesn't go outside the boundaries of like the IT system? So you're not sending a query like that to like a OpenAI or a ChatGPT or a Gemini. What controls are in place there that you're seeing?
So that's the first thing we talk about when we talk about how Salesforce is implementing AI, is that we have agreements with the models to not use any of the data that we're sending to them for training. That's first. The masking of anything that goes out to the model, like, they put together a framework to address all of those, huge concerns that both businesses and certainly government agencies would have. So, that's the first discussion we have is like, should you DIY your AI? And, and not just because I work at Salesforce. And by the way, I'm not an official spokesperson for Salesforce. I work there, but like, I am very excited about the way they've implemented this, because I would have the same concerns. Right. If I were, implementing an application for a government agency, I would want to know what's happening to my data and want to know that there's a framework to not being used for a model. I would want a framework that automatically masks my data, a framework to automatically detect, toxicity and hallucinations that are coming back. So, that's the type of stuff in a DIY approach. You can certainly do that, but there's a lot of onus on the developers to sort of put that whole infrastructure together that's sort of out of the box. And that's the first conversation we have is around trusted AI, because I mean, there's a lot of states that I'm working with now that literally have the chat GPT URL blocked for state employees.
Right.
They're terrified of, because people know that they could get, hey, I want to write a letter to this constituent. ChatGPT would do that quick. Or I wanted, there's a million things it could do in
Yeah.
an automated fashion. They don't want people just doing it on their own in a completely guarded infrastructure. They're waiting to put things in place where the security concerns aren't going to be there.
Yeah. Well, those are some great suggestions and ideas. I've been getting more into the nuts and bolts of large language models and agents and so forth. And everything that you just talked about, like if you're building this thing from scratch, you have to take all those things into consideration and either bring a tool in, and the integrations are getting better between these, but what you don't know can hurt you. Like you can't be naive about what the risks are. And if you're not going to use a platform like Salesforce, if you're going to build that on your own, like you've got to make sure that those risks are being effectively managed. And there's no alerts that say, hey, here's a risk and you should
Right.
consider this. And that's part of the reason why it's important to have, not only a platform that you trust, that you understand that they're controlling for those risks, but also an implementation partner that can help you to understand, one, what's happening under the covers. And second of all, like you mentioned, like even having an audit log, pulling that information out, and then having that transparency there. Like the systems may have it, but having an implementation partner that understands what the options are and help you effectively like implement that governance strategy, I think really becomes critical as well.
I think our implementation partners, and I've worked with you for years now and have always loved to work with you, but like, I think this is a place for implementation partners to really differentiate themselves.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of nuance to not just implementing this, but like the decisions you would make along the way with a customer. Because you're not just like implementing a CRM or implementing a case management system. There's a lot of nuance to this and a lot of places where you could make choices that there's some gray area of risk reward type of thing, or how much development we put into this thing. But if we do it, we could cut 50% of our calls to the call center. So I think implementation partners are going to have the ability to put together practices that not just implement a specific approach, but like help the customers define what that approach should be. And that's what's going to get exciting. I love playing with the tools. I love someone coming to me with, hey, here's the use case. How do we build that out? I've been building prototypes now for the last couple of weeks since Agentforce has gone GA, and it's been incredible. But in a lot of those cases, someone has to come to me with what the use case is, and I'm looking to the implementation partners to flush out what those use cases should be, and then how do we tackle them with the platform?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the more that people understand like what it's used for, like the easier that becomes. I think a lot of folks don't even understand. And I think there's also another mitigating, option here where you've got this person in the middle where you can have an agent do a lot of work, create a draft, say, of like correspondence, and then have that go into a workflow where somebody reviews it and then they give their stamp of approval on it. And, like I think about like in the public sector space, like government benefits eligibility and things like that. Oftentimes that's not something that you're, just going to want to push a button and it automatically takes care of itself. It's here's a draft, here's what we think. And then somebody actually does the review and then does the approval. But I think that this idea, originally the concern was, hey, we're just going to get rid of lots of people. Well, I think the more that we learn, we realize we're not getting rid of the human element to it, because that human element is really crucial in lots of cases. So it's not about eliminating people. It's about really almost avoiding the drudgery of the monotony, getting that out, enforcing the policies. So people aren't, looking up in their manual now, what's the process on this, or what's the policy on this? You can actually bake those policies in through AI into the process,
Yeah.
and it will make that recommendation of, this is the decision, this is why we made the decision that we did, and this is, the reference to the policy on why we did what we did. But I think that human element is just never to be underestimated.
Especially in the public sector.
Yeah,
I mean, all my customers, I'm saying we should never take the human out of the loop, but there's so many monotonous things that a lot of government workers have to do that we could
yeah,
speed up, or,
absolutely.
make faster so that they could spend their time on the important stuff, but not taking the human out of the loop. Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, for a lot of these things, it's just going to be a tool that allows us to do more faster with less resources, which, I don't know a single government agency I work with that isn't resource constrained,
Right.
or getting more, or asking for, more productivity from their constituency. So it's not like we're going to be replacing people, but the people that are still around, we want to enable them to do more with less, which, that's the whole purpose of a lot of these applications in the first place. This is just a sort of a force multiplier for, doing just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I feel like it's a little bit of a platitude. Oh, get rid of the mundane stuff so you can pay attention to the more important stuff. In my experience, people have limited time to make decisions and for attention. And when 90% of that is consumed with the minutia of a process, it really keeps you out of that higher executive level thinking. And as I've implemented AI in my own life just to take care of that minutia, I've found myself gravitating towards, hey, these are the bigger issues. These are the bigger things that I need to be paying attention. I'm not just worried about writing the paragraph. I'm thinking about, well, how does that paragraph tie into the win themes that we have for, say, a particular proposal response? So, and if you haven't experienced that, I strongly suggest, uh, playing around with that and really seeing how your attention shifts to those more executive, higher level things. Have you found that, Jerry?
You're focusing more on the big picture than
Yeah,
just, okay, here's an individual task I have to solve. How do I actually solve that in this, like you said, in the scope of the big picture? I think is incredibly important, and something that you need, you in the loop to figure out. As people start to implement these things, I think those are the types of things that we want them to be thinking about, is like not just solving an individual problem, but, how that problem fits into sort of the larger, yeah, no. And again, that goes back to sort of that governance board, or maybe not a governance board, but, like a AI applicability board, or, I think there's a lot of cases where people might look at a particular thing and solve it a couple different ways. And I think there's going to be expertise out there about the right way to solve certain problems in the context of the bigger solution, or where to expend effort to solve certain problems that, uh, you know, that otherwise, if you're not looking at the big picture, you otherwise wouldn't see.
yeah, absolutely. Well, one final question, Jerry. What have we not talked about AI and large language models? I feel like we've kind of gone from, a little bit about the technology to making decisions to the tools that are available. What else do we need to be paying attention to in the world of AI?
Um, I think back to my point where I was talking about like going to doing a workshop with a bunch of college students and not realizing like how much they used AI in their day to day. I think one of the things that opened my eyes to is that it's not just, hey, we have this great set of tools now where we can build agents that are going to deflect calls to my call center, or, I click on a field in an application and it's automatically going to summarize a case and tell me what the next steps are. Like that there are the young people that are going to be moving into a lot of these jobs. Like this is just an expectation. that we really should be talking about how do we build applications work the way that the incoming crop of people expect them to, because like they understand how easy it is to do these things, and we want them to be able to use these tools as part of the thing. So it's not just the using of the tools, but how do we factor a lot of these applications so that they're usable and the expected functionality is there by the users that are in college right now and coming out, because we want the best and the brightest for companies, for government workers.
Right.
So thinking about how we actually design our applications in a way that's attractive to get someone into a role where they can actually have an effect on a government agency, helping more people, or helping a broader group of people with a company. So that's one thing. What we're not talking about enough is putting together practices around, the right use cases for the right scenario. I think we're just now building out a million different use cases of what AI can do, using those to come up with a cookbook for like, well, what should I do? Or
Right.
when is it applicable? Or governance models around, not taking the human out of the loop. So I think a lot of the states that are a little leery of getting into AI, I think they want to see some of that stuff baked out. And there's definitely a lot of use cases where things are going live. And I think those anecdotal stories of how AI solves something is going to put together the template that a lot of people look at. But, I think there needs to be a lot of learning on how these things get implemented and what the outcome was that is going to sort of propel people with their adoption.
Yeah, I think those are two great points. And along with your first point, I can't help but think that people are going to gravitate towards organizations that have these tools available to them. Like I said, there's very good awareness of what large language models can do, what AI can do. If they have a more sophisticated, advanced set of tools, that's the type of environment that I would want to be in. And so, whether it's government or whether it's business, like this may be one of those differentiating factors in attracting, like you said, the best and the brightest talent.
Right.
So it's definitely something to be thinking about. And it's easy to punt this technology down the road and say, we'll figure it out later. Things are coming so quickly. I've never in my career seen a technology with an adoption curve like this. Even back in the .com days, like nothing is even close to this. And even through my own kind of experimentation with AI, I'm continually surprised. Oh, it can do this. Oh, it can do this. I just don't feel like I've gotten anywhere close to the bottom of what its capabilities are. And so there may be this temptation to put it off to another day. Whatever guardrails you need to put in place to get your organization experimenting, developing proof concepts, I think is going to be really critical.
So I at least some of the government agencies I'm working with, they want to attack the low-hanging fruit first, just to get comfortable with the process, the technologies. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there with, agents that can just answer constituent questions with a RAG search into Data Cloud. Like that's very low-hanging fruit. There's no PII involved. But as we've seen, from different examples, like doing RAG search against, say, a policy document to answer a question is very easy to set up. That puts the framework in place. Now we can start to look at other use cases. So, and a lot of the agencies are looking at that. That's an easy way to get familiar with how we could use these tools in a very safe way. Everything we're searching is a public-facing document anyway. There's no PII in there. Like, why not start with something like that? And if that works, let's grow into other things. So I guess my point is, I like when agencies take let's start small and grow, because I think with any technology, not just generative AI, but like Salesforce in general, or any adoption of technology, if you get quick wins and quick understanding and then grow on that, evolve on that, and iterate quickly. Like that's the best way to get success, is to just iterate on with small wins, because then everyone's learning along the way. You're getting understanding along the way. Things become demystified along the way. So I totally agree with you that, that's what's one of the things that's going to push in adoption.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jerry. This has been a great conversation. Really appreciate your time. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
I feel like I'm scratching the surface because I think we're both in the same boat. We're both learning sort of on the fly as things are coming. Things are coming out fast and furious. But I'm like you, this is the most excited I've been about a new sort of technology platform, in a long time. Just because of the things we can do and how quickly we can do them, and the desire of the agencies where this could have a massive effect, whether it's deflecting calls in a call center or, the number of cases a caseworker can process. Like this can really move the needle. And the more I play with the technology and build prototypes, like I'm sort of re-energized, and not that I was jaded before, because I still love playing with the technology and building prototypes, but like this has gotten, and not just me, a lot of coworkers, like a lot of the people I'm talking to and working with are, genuinely excited about how this can go. But you're right, we're just scratching the surface, and there's a lot more to come.
Yeah. Well, excellent. We'll have to do this again. Thanks, Jerry. Really appreciate your time, and hope everybody enjoyed this. If you liked it, go ahead and leave a comment, and any suggestions for other topics that you would like to cover. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jason. Great talking to you.
Okay, you too. Bye.